Shabbat Shalom. As I'm sure most of you know, I spent 3 years teaching English in Japan. And it was the only time in my life where the question was presented very innocently to me, which is my favorite question in all the world: where are you from? In Japan, this was a very important question. I was teaching English, and many of the students, many of them business people, wanted to make sure they were learning proper English. There was unfortunately, a rather negative attitude towards learning Australian or New Zealand English, and they wanted to have a British teacher, like my wife, or at the very least an American teacher, to make sure that they were getting their money's worth from the academy. And I had no problem saying I'm from America. I'm from, in fact, California and San Diego. They were all very impressed. But then they put 2 and 2 together, and they said, but wait a minute, that thing on your head, referring to my kippah, I thought you said you were from America. I said, well, yes, I am from America, but I'm also Jewish. Blew their minds. Many of them did not realize that there were people in America that were not Christian. They thought that was part and parcel. On that, they got closer to the experience that I have had, both myself as well as through my extended family, of the where are you from question. And this is a question that if you've never had it put to you with that level of inquiry, perhaps you are unfamiliar with the intention behind the question is. They're not asking you what city you happen to live in. They're not asking what state you were born in. They are asking, where are you from? Because clearly you're not American. And unfortunately, this is a question that continues to divide many people in our nation, and one that if you do not fit what is often promulgated as being the ideal version of American, you will hear more often, and you will hear it with that intonation. No, where are you from? Where are you originally from? And when I point out I'm a 3rd-generation Californian, that doesn't satisfy. With that in mind, that attunement to the right intonation behind a question, we come to our beginning of preparation for Pesach. Because Passover is all about questions. Questions are built into the narrative that God gives us of how Passover will play out in the future generations. 4 times we are told to answer the questions or to anticipate the question of our children when it comes time for Pesach. And you may be thinking, wait, 4 times we are told to ask questions? There are 4 questions in the Haggadah, absolutely, but more than those 4 questions, which are the most famous, is the section that comes next, the 4 children. One of the most famous sections of the entire Haggadah, and one that I usually hear the most complaints about, because people are very unhappy with the treatment of the Rasha, of the wicked child. After all, what is the wicked child's question? Let's do a quick Passover 101. I know Purim is just done, but that means Passover is only a month away. Come on, we got to get in the spirit of things. What is the wicked child's question? All right, we need to break out our Haggadot a little bit early this year. The wicked child's question is simply, what does this avodah, this work, service, sacrifice, mean to you? And the answer for the wicked child, that may be a bit more in people's memory, set his teeth on edge and tell him that if he had been there, he would not have gone out from Egypt, that God had saved me, but not him, because he had separated himself from the community. Okay, a little harsh. Wasn't he just asking what this means to you? I mean, isn't that a perfectly normal, innocent question? Isn't it, in fact, a question that is found in the Torah itself, where God says, your children will ask you what this means to you? What is the purpose of this avodah to you? Shouldn't we be prepared? Shouldn't we be glad to give our own personal feelings, our own personal reflections, their own personal meaning that comes from the celebration not only of Pesach, but all of Judaism? Why are we getting on this kid's case? Why are we so angry? Why are we threatening him that he would be left behind? It's a little rough, isn't it? And every year, whenever we have guests at our Seder, I can see them squirm, especially when I make them read that section. And most of them are uncomfortable with the idea that this would be how they would answer their children. And that's the point. The questioner on the page could be anyone. What does this mean to you? Perfectly normal, straight text on a page. But what does that mean to you? Well, the actual words will depend on who is saying them and the background, relationship, context, and everything else that goes into the history of that encounter prior to sitting at that table that particular Pesach. A child might ask that question one year and mean it simply, hey, Mom, Dad, tell me about Pesach and why you love it so much. And the next year the child may be asking, why are you doing this? You seem like a hypocrite. Same words could be used in both cases, and yet the meaning could be fundamentally different. That is how Judaism teaches us to hear the underlying question, the subtext, if you will, of what is in the mind and heart of the person asking the question, so that we will answer them, not by rote, not by formula, not by reciting a catechism, but to hear the true individuality that is embedded within words, even if those words are words that are shared throughout all of our text. But you may still feel unsatisfied. Surely no one deserves to get the response that the wicked child gets in the Haggadah. Surely no one deserves to be told, if you were there, you would have been left behind. That's just mean, isn't it? Well, yes and no. To some children, yes, that would be a terrible thing to say. For others, it would be what we might call, in the modern terminology, tough love. That is to say, you are telling the child now, and remember, this child may be an adult at this point, as anyone who is still the child of a parent is always a child, regardless of how old they are. You are telling this child, in the circumstance that the Haggadah imagines, a child that is on the verge of separating themselves from the community. The child is on the verge of throwing off everything that God has tried to give us and everything that God has tried to teach us. The child is on the very edge of drifting away from family, friends, and community into the abyss of the world beyond. At that point, simply saying, well, you know, it's because we were slaves in Egypt and God took us out with a mighty hand, and isn't it wonderful, isn't going to do it. It's not going to work. It's not going to pull them back in. It's not going to be the wake-up call, the slap in the face, the cold water across the head, the dose of reality, to point out that the direction this child is going, that this young person is drifting, is in fact going to lead them to disaster. Sometimes we have to have the intervention. Sometimes it happens at the Seder. Sometimes it happens in a more quiet moment and in just a one-on-one conversation. But we cannot pass up the opportunity when a question comes out, again, in the imagination of the Haggadah, with so much writing upon how it gets answered, to recognize that sometimes the answer has to be harsh. The answer has to be strong, because some people have painted themselves into a corner where only words that are painted so clearly for them will allow them to realize where they now stand. Sometimes they have to be shown that they are on the edge of the precipice before they can be talked back. And talked back with open arms and with a loving heart. But that loving heart means we cannot ignore the need of speaking truthfully to them and powerfully. It's not one size fits all. Not every child needs this response. Not every child needs any of the four responses. Each child needs their own response. But we must make sure we keep our options open, we keep a broad palette in order to be able to answer them, each and every one. Shabbat Shalom.